The folks on the ranch never expected anything unusual that chilly morning, not with the mist still hanging low across the fields and the barns quiet except for the sound of horses shifting in their stalls. Life moved slow and steady out there, shaped by the rhythm of early mornings, the smell of hay, and the familiar chorus of hooves on dirt. But everything changed the moment the ranch hand came running from the foaling barn, shouting in a voice that carried across the entire stretch of land. His words caught everyone off guard because they made no sense at first. He said the youngest foal, barely old enough to stand tall without wobbling, was showing signs no one could explain. Signs that made every person on the ranch freeze where they stood. Signs that made their hearts jump with a mix of fear and confusion. Signs that led them to call the police before anyone dared to take another step closer. They walked toward the barn slowly, uncertain, looking from one face to another as if someone else might know what was going on. The tension spread fast. Even the horses sensed it, snorting and shifting as the air grew tight. The sun had barely touched the fences, and yet the ranch felt colder than usual. The word pregnant should never have been linked to a foal. It sounded like something out of a strange tale, not real life. But the ranch hand had insisted he saw what he saw. And he was not the type to panic without reason. As they gathered near the barn doors, breaths turning white in the cold air, the ranch owner pushed forward. He was a quiet man most days, steady as the earth beneath his boots, but even he felt a shiver slip up his spine. He had raised horses his whole life. He knew what was possible and what was not. And this, whatever it was, fell far outside anything he had ever known. Every instinct in him told him something was wrong. Something was missing. Something was hidden. When he stepped inside, the soft sound of the foal's breathing filled the barn. The little one stood with her head lowered, coat shining under the lantern light, innocent as any young horse could be. Yet there was a strange heaviness to the air around her, a kind of stillness that felt unnatural. The ranch owner looked closer, his expression tightening as he studied the foal's body, the swelling, the signs, the things no one could ignore. He backed up a little, swiping a hand over his face as if hoping his eyes were playing tricks. Others moved in behind him, whispering in low voices, afraid to say too much. They exchanged worried looks that grew more serious with each passing second. One of them repeated what the ranch hand had said, almost under his breath, as if saying the words too loud might make the situation worse. The foal is pregnant. The idea alone seemed impossible. It didn't match nature's rules. It didn't match anything they had ever learned. And yet the signs were there in front of them. No one wanted to jump to the worst conclusions, but fear creeped in anyway. They began throwing around ideas, trying to make sense of the impossible. Could it be a sickness, some rare condition no one knew about? Could it be a mistake, something that looked like one thing but turned out to be something else entirely? Anything seemed easier to believe than the explanation their minds kept circling back to. Because if the impossible was somehow true, then someone was responsible. And that meant someone had done something no decent person would do. The rancher refused to let that thought settle in his mind. He would not allow his land to be tied to anything cruel or unnatural. Still, with uncertainty growing, there was only one thing they could do: call the police, call for help, call someone who could investigate with clear eyes and a trained hand. The phone call was quick but heavy. The ranch hand tried to keep his voice steady, explaining only the facts and nothing more. The officer on the other end paused more than once, asking him to repeat certain parts, likely thinking he misheard. But eventually he agreed to send a team out. And the weight of that moment fell across the ranch like a dark cloud. While they waited, the people gathered in small groups, speaking in low tones and watching the path for any sign of approaching lights. The tension settled into their shoulders. Even the dogs lay close, ears perked, picking up on the strange energy filling the air. The ranch owner stayed near the foal, refusing to leave her side. He stroked her neck, watching her eyes, trying to read any sign of distress. She seemed calm, unaware of the storm building around her. She nudged his hand lightly, trusting him without question. That made his chest tighten. This was not just a ranch mystery. This was a responsibility, a living, breathing life depending on him. He felt the weight of that truth stronger than anything else. The key words of the moment echoed in his mind: mystery, suspense, investigation. Nothing made sense yet, but everything was about to change. He knew that once the police arrived, secrets would start unraveling. Answers would surface whether people were ready for them or not. Word spread faster than the morning wind. Neighbors from nearby properties started arriving after hearing bits and pieces about the strange discovery. Curious faces peered over fences, and whispers drifted through the barnyard. Some folks shook their heads, refusing to believe any part of the story. Others looked uneasy, like they feared what the truth might reveal. A few suggested that maybe this was some kind of rare medical phenomenon, something that science could explain if given the chance. But even those voices carried doubt. Everyone could feel that something deeper was hiding beneath the surface. The rancher listened to the murmurs but didn't join in. He stayed focused on the foal, his mind racing with possibilities he didn't want to accept. He had seen strange things in his time, moments nature behaved differently than expected, but never anything like this. He wondered if there had been signs he missed, something overlooked during feeding or grooming, something quiet and subtle that would make meaning now. He searched his memories, replaying days and nights, trying to find a clue. But nothing came. Outside, the sound of a vehicle rolling down the long dirt road broke the tension. People turned toward the entrance of the ranch as the police truck approached, dust rising behind it. The officer stepped out, followed by a veterinarian they had contacted for support. Their faces carried the kind of seriousness that made everyone step back a little. They were here to uncover the truth, whatever that truth might be. As the officers approached the barn, the rancher felt his pulse quicken. The air thickened, filled with expectation. He knew that once they stepped inside, there would be no going back to how things were before. No more disbelief, no more guessing. The truth would take shape. The officer asked a few quick questions, voice calm but alert. The ranch hand repeated what he saw, this time slower, more careful. Then the veterinarian moved closer to the foal, examining her with steady hands while everyone held their breath. Minutes felt like hours as she checked signs, behavior, physical changes, and anything else that might offer explanation. Then she looked up, her expression unreadable, the kind of expression that made everyone freeze. She said she needed to run tests. She said she needed more information before giving any answer, but her tone hinted she had already formed a theory. A theory she was not yet willing to share, and that made the tension spike even higher. The rancher felt something shift in the room: fear, curiosity, suspense, a pressure building inside every person as they realized this mystery was bigger than any of them expected. The veterinarian stepped outside to prepare her equipment. The police officer followed her, speaking in a low voice. The rancher watched them through the barn door, feeling the weight of the unknown pushing in on him. And just before the officer disappeared around the corner, he glanced back with a look that sent a cold rush through the rancher's chest. A look that suggested the truth, whatever it was, would change everything. That was the moment the rancher knew this story was only beginning. The foal's strange condition, the unanswered questions, the quiet fear hanging under the rafters, all pointed toward something no one on the ranch was ready to hear, something that would shake the calm life they had always known. The officer's voice carried softly from outside, but the rancher couldn't make out the words. He stepped closer, heart pounding, the foal shifting behind him as if sensing the tension. Whatever the truth was, it lay just ahead, waiting to reveal itself. The ranch grew quieter after the police and veterinarians stepped away from the barn, but it was the kind of quiet that carried weight. The workers stood scattered across the yard, each trying to make sense of the strange situation without letting their thoughts slip too far into dark places. The rancher stayed close to the barn door, one hand resting against the frame, listening to the soft shifting of the foal behind him. He felt torn between wanting answers and fearing what those answers might reveal. He had seen many things in his years working the land. He had dealt with harsh seasons, unexpected losses, and moments when the ranch seemed to bend under pressure but never break. Yet nothing had prepared him for a morning like this. The idea of a foal showing signs of pregnancy felt wrong on every level. Nature simply did not work that way. It went against everything he understood about horses, breeding, and basic life cycles. And that impossibility was what made the mystery so unsettling? The veterinarian re-entered the barn with a small kit in her hands, her expression calm but serious. She moved with purpose, asking only a few questions before beginning her examination. The rancher answered each one carefully, wanting to help but unsure what information might matter. The veterinarian made small notes as she worked, touching the foal gently, speaking to her in a low tone. The foal stayed calm, as if sensing the woman meant no harm. While she worked, the rancher's mind drifted back to how the foal came to be on his land in the first place. She had been born late in the season, smaller than most, with legs that trembled every time she tried to stand. Her mother had been a gentle Marais, the kind with soft eyes that seemed to understand every word spoken to her. She passed not long after giving birth, leaving the rancher with the responsibility of raising the little one by hand. Everyone on the ranch had chipped in, taking turns feeding her and keeping her warm during those cold, early nights. She grew stronger, learned to trust them, and became a quiet, bright spot in an otherwise tough year. He remembered the way she would run circles in the corral when the sun dipped low, kicking up dust and flicking her tail like she owned the place. She was young, barely more than a baby herself, and that was what made the veterinarian's findings so confusing. Nothing about the foal's life or care suggested anything unusual. She had never been off the ranch. She had never been near another young stallion, let alone a mature one. There was simply no explanation that fit. Outside, the officer spoke to a few workers, trying to get a feel for the ranch's routines. The rancher could hear parts of their conversation floating in through the open doorway. Words like timeline, behavior, and medical examination reached his ears. The officer did not sound accusatory, but he sounded concerned, and that made the rancher uneasy. He did not like the idea of anyone suspecting wrongdoing on his land. Everyone here worked hard, respected the animals, and cared for the ranch like it was their own. The veterinarian finished her initial check and stepped back, giving the foal a gentle pat. She looked to the rancher, then toward the officer, who entered the barn a moment later. Her expression held a mix of confusion and caution, as if she were trying to decide how much to reveal without drawing wrong conclusions. She explained that the signs she was seeing were extremely unusual, something she had never encountered before. She mentioned rare conditions, hormonal imbalances, and developmental issues that could mimic symptoms. She made it clear that while the signs resembled early pregnancy, she was not ready to label it as such. Her words did little to ease the tension. If anything, they deepened the sense of mystery. The rancher could tell she was holding back some thoughts, waiting until she had test results. He respected that, but it didn't calm his unease. The idea that something rare or unknown was happening inside that small foal made him protective. He wanted to shield her from prying eyes, from judgment, from anything that might threaten her well-being. The officer took notes, asking steady questions about the ranch's history, the foal's birth, and the last few weeks. The rancher answered each one carefully, feeling the weight of every word. He was honest, though nerves tugged at him. He had nothing to hide, but the unusual nature of the situation made it easy for people to jump to conclusions. The officer looked around the barn, studying the stalls, the feed bins, the layout, absorbing everything with a calm that only heightened the suspense. After a while, the veterinarian carried her supplies outside to prepare the samples for transport. The officer followed, leaving the rancher alone for a moment. He turned back to the foal, who lifted her head and blinked softly at him. Her innocence made the situation feel even stranger. Whatever was happening to her was not her fault, nor the ranch's, but until answers came, the ranch felt caught in a shadow of uncertainty. Workers drifted around the yard, whispering again. Some wondered if the foal might be sick with something new, maybe a disease no one recognized. Others guessed it could be a strange growth or a false response triggered by stress. A few looked worried, as if they feared outside authorities might blame them for something they had no part in. The rancher saw the unease growing and stepped outside to speak with them. He told them to stay calm, to focus on their work, and to let the professionals do their jobs. He reminded them the ranch had nothing to hide. They nodded, but he could still see concern in their eyes. The ranch was their livelihood, their community, and the thought of losing trust with authorities felt heavy on all of them. As the morning stretched into afternoon, The veterinarian loaded the samples into her vehicle, promising to send them to a specialized lab. She would return when she knew more. The officer said he would stay nearby in case more questions came up. His tone remained steady, but the rancher sensed he was preparing for something larger, maybe an investigation. Maybe more visits. Maybe questions no one had thought to ask yet. After they left the barn area, the rancher took a long walk across the property, needing space to think. The wind brushed through the tall grass, carrying the familiar earthy scent he usually found comforting, but today it did little to settle him. He walked past the corral, the pond, the line of cottonwoods that marked the back boundary. Everywhere he went, he replayed the morning's events in his mind. He thought back to the mare who had given birth to the foal. She had been healthy before her sudden passing, and nothing in her condition had hinted at complications. He wondered if something hidden had passed from mother to child, some rare biological pattern no one recognized. He thought of the foal's diet, her behavior, her playfulness. Nothing seemed strange. When he returned, he found the officer speaking quietly with one of the workers. Their conversation stopped when he approached. The officer gave him a calm nod, saying he would file a report for now and return the next day to follow up. The rancher nodded stiffly, watching as the officer got into his truck and drove off down the dusty road. The ranch slowly returned to motion after that, though the tension lingered like a shadow. Every chore felt heavier. Every sound made people turn their heads. The foal remained inside the barn, resting quietly. The rancher checked on her often, sitting with her in the quiet moments, listening to her gentle breathing. He wondered how such a small life had become the center of such a confusing mystery. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in warm colors, the rancher stood outside the barn and looked toward the road where the police truck had disappeared. The land looked calm, but he knew the calm was only on the surface. Beneath it, questions waited, doubts waited. And somewhere out there, the truth waited too. The veterinarian's words replayed in his mind. Rare conditions, hormonal imbalance, signs that didn't make sense. But beneath her careful explanations, he sensed something else. Something she didn't want to say until she was certain. The rancher felt the weight of it settle on him. This was no simple confusion, no misunderstanding. Something strange and unexplained had found its way into their quiet world. And until the test results came back, the ranch would live in the long, tense space between fear and truth, waiting for the mystery to unfold. The wind had turned sharper by the time the sun crept behind the cottonwoods, and the ranch seemed to hold its breath as the strange news spread from one corner of the yard to the other. Folks whispered about the foal that looked like it was carrying something it should not have been carrying. Word traveled between the ranch hands, slipped through the screen door of the old bunkhouse, and drifted toward the barn where the lanterns glowed warm against the dusk. No one was ready to understand it, and no one wanted to say the wrong thing out loud. Still, the worry pushed at everyone's nerves until the whole place felt tighter than a wire fence in winter. The sheriff had left earlier, promising to return once he pulled together more help, and the sight of his taillights fading down the dirt road only made the tension grow. No one knew whether this was something dangerous or just something strange, but strange had its own kind of danger when it showed up uninvited. The foal lay resting in the stall, breathing soft and steady, unaware of all the worry outside her door. The old mare stayed close, pacing the straw and nudging her young one now and then as if she sensed the nervousness in the air. The ranch owner stood near the barn doors, arms folded, gaze fixed on the horizon. He looked like someone trying to hold back more questions than answers. A few of the hands gathered behind him, staying quiet, glancing toward the stall every few seconds. Whatever this was, it had turned the peaceful ranch into a place full of shadows and second thoughts. Inside the barn, the faint smell of hay mixed with the scent of dust, leather, and the lingering warmth of the animals. It felt familiar, steady, something everyone could cling to while the mystery kept growing. The vet sat on a small wooden stool near the stall, tapping notes into a battered clipboard. He didn't speak much, but his frown deepened every time he reread what he had written. He had seen sickness and injuries, strange infections and birth complications, but this situation pushed past anything he had ever carried into his memory. As the hours wore on, the story began stretching through every part of the ranch life. The hands replayed every moment they remembered from the past week. Some recalled how the foal had been a little more tired than usual. Others said they noticed her belly had grown subtly, too slow to raise alarms at first. But none of that explained the way she had suddenly seemed heavier, how her sides had looked swollen, or why she acted restless the night before the truth came out. The questions piled up like logs waiting for firewood splitting, and still no one dared suggest anything that would cause harm or scandal. Everyone wanted a clean explanation, something that made sense without putting blame on anybody or anything. The vet finally stood and stretched his back, then stepped outside for a breath of air. The ranch owner followed him out, and they stopped near the trough, speaking low. Though their voices carried only pieces of sentences, it was clear the mystery did not have a simple answer yet. The vet mentioned strange signs, unusual swelling, and the possibility of a rare condition. The ranch owner asked if someone might have intentionally caused harm or stress to the foal, but the vet shook his head firmly, insisting he had seen no marks or injuries that pointed toward mistreatment. It eased some tension but left plenty behind. Back inside, the ranch hands kept tending to chores, though their minds stayed locked on the situation. The hands moved slower than usual, as if each step was tied to the knot forming in their thoughts. They checked the horses again and again, making sure nothing else seemed wrong. A few stood near the stall door, talking quietly about odd things happening around the countryside lately. One mentioned hearing about abandoned livestock found near the river. Another talked about a strange wild animal sighting. Someone else muttered about the government checking cattle in nearby towns for infection. Every theory grew legs before it faded away in confusion. The old ranch dog padded through the barn, ears twitching with every new sound. Even he seemed on edge, pausing near the stall before resting at the vet's stool. Animals often sensed things people could not, and the sight of him staying that close to the foal made everyone more unsettled. The lantern light flickered as the wind brushed the walls. Shadows moved gently across the hay, stretching and shrinking with each shift. The mood felt heavy, like something unseen stood in the corners waiting to be named. Even the horses in other stalls stirred restlessly, stomping their hooves or snorting softly. The vet walked back in, wiping his hands on a cloth. He approached the stall to check the foal again. She lifted her head weakly, her dark eyes following him. He placed his palm against her side, feeling the warmth, the faint movement beneath her ribs, something he could not yet interpret. The mare nudged his shoulder, uneasy but trusting him enough to let him work. He stood up slowly and leaned on the stall door, deep in thought. The ranch owner stepped beside him and asked if anything had changed. The vet replied that the swelling seemed more defined now, like something inside the foal was shifting or settling. But without running deeper tests, he couldn't say what was happening. A few of the hands shifted uneasily at that. They didn't want to think about what deeper tests meant or how long this mystery would stretch on. They had never dealt with anything like this. The foal was supposed to be the symbol of hope for the ranch, a sign things were turning for the better. Instead, she had become the center of a mystery that pulled in fear and curiosity in equal measure. By late evening, lanterns were replaced with electric lights, and the barn took on a brighter glow. The brightness didn't push away the tension, though. If anything, it made the strange situation clearer, more real. The foal had not eaten much, and though she rested calmly, her belly looked even more unusual. Everyone took turns watching her, as if waiting for a sign, a clue, anything that pointed toward understanding. Outside, the dry grass rustled softly while the sky shifted from deep blue to black. Stars emerged one by one, scattered across the wide open sky the way they always did in that part of the old American countryside. But tonight, even the stars felt distant, unable to offer comfort. Near the barn entrance, the ranch owner gathered the group to share what the sheriff had told him earlier before leaving. The sheriff had said he'd continue asking around, speaking with nearby ranches, checking for reports of animal disturbances or strange illness. He didn't seem convinced this was a criminal matter, but he also didn't want to rule anything out. The idea that the authorities were now involved weighed heavily on everyone. It made the situation feel bigger than the ranch, bigger than anything they had handled before. One of the younger hands asked if the foal could be moved to a small corral for monitoring, but the vet insisted she remain inside where light, warmth, and quiet could be controlled. Another hand asked whether the swelling could be some kind of infection. The vet answered carefully, saying he couldn't rule out anything yet, but infections usually came with fever or pain, neither of which he saw. Every explanation created another question. Every question created another uneasy silence. The ranch owner's wife arrived with blankets and warm drinks for the crew. She moved through the barn with a calm presence, offering quiet reassurance without speaking much. When she paused by the stall, she reached out and stroked the mare's neck gently, whispering something no one else heard. The mare relaxed slightly under her touch. The hours grew longer, night deepened. The vet said he would need to call for specialized equipment in the morning, something that could give him a better look at what was happening internally without causing the full stress. The idea of waiting until morning felt like walking a tightrope, but there was no other choice. The ranch owner decided that 2 people should stay in the barn overnight to keep watch. Volunteers stepped forward immediately, unwilling to leave the foal alone even for a moment. They set out bedrolls near the stall, keeping lamps lit and staying alert. As quiet settled in again, a soft sound echoed from the stall. It wasn't a cry or a whinny, but something different, something none of them had heard before. Everyone looked toward the foal at the same moment. The mare stood rigid, ears pointed forward, watching her young one intently. The strange sound came again, faint but clear enough to raise the hairs on the back of every neck in the barn. Something was happening inside that stall, something that didn't match any of their earlier theories. And whatever it was changing fast. The strange sound echoed in the barn again, soft at first, then steady enough that everyone standing watch leaned forward without even realizing they were moving. The mare shifted her weight nervously, pressing her shoulder against the stall wall as if trying to shield her young one from whatever was happening. The foal lifted her head, breathing unevenly, and the rise and fall of her belly made the ranch hands stare with a mix of fear and fascination. No one dared speak. The entire barn felt wrapped in a thick, expectant silence. The vet stepped closer, moving slowly so he would not startle the animals. He whispered for someone to bring another lamp, saying he needed better light. When the new lamp was set beside him, he placed his hands along the foal's side and closed his eyes, concentrating. Even in the quiet, the strange pulsing sound from within her seemed louder now. It was like a steady thrum, faint but real, as though something alive inside her was responding to the tension around it. The ranch owner leaned against the stall door, watching the vet with a seriousness that made the younger ranch hands straighten up. They had seen him worried before, but never like this. His eyes stayed fixed on the foal, and his hands curled into fists at his sides. The weight of responsibility sat heavy on his shoulders. This ranch was his legacy and livelihood, and every animal under its roof mattered to him. Having something so unusual happen here was something he never expected. The night stretched on. The sheriff had not returned yet, and though the ranch hands knew he would eventually come back, the waiting felt longer than the dark hours themselves. The wind outside had picked up, whistling through the cracks between the old barn boards, carrying dust and the faint smell of sage from the open fields. Finally, the vet pulled his hands back from the foal and exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath for minutes. He turned to the group and said he still did not know the root cause of the swelling, but whatever it was had shifted again. Something inside her body had changed. He said her heart rate was steady but elevated, her breathing shallow but not distressed. He insisted she needed constant monitoring through the night. No one argued. They all felt the urgency in his voice. A few of the ranch hands whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of it all. One of them said he had heard rumors of odd animal changes happening across the county, though no one knew if those stories were true. Another mentioned that livestock inspectors had visited a neighboring town recently, raising questions about whether something in the grazing fields might be causing unusual reactions. The ranch owner put an end to the speculation, reminding them they needed facts, not rumors. But even he could not hide how unsettled he felt. Hours passed, and the lanterns burned lower. Some of the ranch hands took turns stepping outside for fresh air, returning with dust on their boots and worry on their faces. The ranch dog stayed glued to the vet's side, ears perked, eyes locked on the foal as if he expected something to happen at any moment. Even the horses in the other stalls seemed restless, shuffling, huffing, pawing at the ground. Then, as if the air itself tightened, the foal shifted again, letting out a low, shaky sound that made everyone step closer. The vet's head snapped up, his expression sharpening. He murmured that the pressure inside her had changed again, faster this time. His voice carried a hint of urgency that pulled everyone's nerves tight. The Murray pressed her nose against the foal's neck, breathing in short, anxious bursts. One of the ranch hands rushed to the door when they heard the distant rumble of an engine approaching. Finally, the sheriff's truck rolled into the yard, headlights bouncing across the dirt. He climbed out with 2 other officers, their boots crunching loudly as they made their way toward the barn. The sheriff's face was serious but calm, though he looked puzzled when he saw the group huddled so closely around the stall. He asked for an update, and the ranch owner quickly explained the changes, the sounds, the strange internal movement. The sheriff frowned, not because he doubted them, but because he understood how unusual this situation had become. He stepped closer, peering into the stall with a cautious look. The foal's belly rose and fell in an uneven rhythm that clearly caught his attention. He muttered that he had never seen anything like it. The vet asked for one of the officers to fetch a medical kit from his truck, something he had brought specifically for emergency cases. The officer returned quickly, and the vet set the tools beside the stall. He explained he wanted to check the foal again with a small light and stethoscope, hoping the extra tools would clarify what he was hearing inside her. When he placed the stethoscope against her side, his brow furrowed. He listened again on another section, then another. His eyes widened slightly, though he tried to maintain a calm expression so he would not alarm the others. But everyone saw the shift in his posture. It sent a ripple of unease through the group. The sheriff folded his arms and asked if what he found was dangerous. The vet hesitated, then said he did not know if it was dangerous, but it was definitely not normal. He said he heard something inside that did not match anything he had encountered before. He described it as rhythmic but irregular, like a pattern forming and breaking apart in ways he did not understand. The ranch hands exchanged nervous looks. The ranch owner's wife entered the barn again with a fresh lantern, her face pale but steady. She approached the group quietly and asked if the foal was worsening. The ranch owner shook his head gently and said they were still trying to understand what was happening. She stepped closer to the Murray, offering a soft touch to calm her. The Murray leaned into her hand, trembling slightly. The sheriff took a deep breath, then said he would need to make a report to the county but wanted to wait until the vet had more concrete information. He did not want rumors spreading through the town before they had real answers. His decision brought a little relief, though the uncertainty stayed thick in the barn. As the night crept toward dawn, the pressure inside the stall seemed to grow with every passing minute. The foal tried to stand several times but settled back down, too weak to steady herself. The vet kept checking her, his worry growing despite his calm voice. He whispered that whatever was happening inside her was reaching a point where something had to give. Whether that meant danger or discovery, no one knew. The ranch owner stepped outside for a moment, staring across the open fields where the first hint of morning light touched the horizon. The sky held a pale glow, the kind that made every shadow stretch longer. He thought about the years he had spent building this ranch, about the hope that each new foal brought to the land. He had weathered droughts, storms, and hard seasons, but nothing had prepared him for this. When he returned to the barn, the tension inside seemed even stronger. The vet asked for warm water and cloths, and several ranch hands rushed to fetch them. The sheriff ordered his officers to secure the area around the barn, telling them to keep watch for anything unusual. No one questioned why he said that. The whole situation felt like it could swing toward something unexpected at any second. The foal let out another strained sound, louder this time, and the Mare nudged her as if urging her to stay calm. The vet leaned over her again, trying to listen for any change. His voice dropped to a whisper as he told the ranch owner that the internal movement had increased again. Pulsing stronger now. Everyone could feel it. Something was building. Something that demanded attention, demanded understanding. The air inside the barn felt charged, almost humming with tension. The ranch dog suddenly lifted his head and stared at the foal with an intensity none of them had seen in him before. His ears twitched. His tail stiffened. He did not bark. He simply watched. Then, as the first full streak of dawnlight pushed through the barn window, the foal's body tensed all at once, every muscle tightening in a way that sent a jolt through the group. The mare braced herself beside her young one, letting out a low, trembling sound. The vet grabbed his tools, the ranch owner moved closer, and the sheriff stepped forward, ready for anything. Everyone stood frozen, breaths held, waiting for the moment that had been building hour by hour. Something was about to happen, something none of them were ready for. And whatever it was, it would change everything. The foal's whole body trembled, and for a moment no one breathed. The vet leaned in, bracing his hand gently against her side, and the sheriff stepped even closer, his boots scraping softly against the old barn floor. The ranch hands stood tense, gripping the stall door as if holding on to something solid might steady the moment. The mare pressed herself protectively against the foal, letting out a soft sound that was somewhere between warning and comfort. Everything felt suspended, as if the world outside the barn had gone still. Then the tension in the foal's body eased just a little. Her ears flicked, her eyes blinked, and the sharp fear in the air shifted into cautious hope. The vet moved quickly, adjusting the lantern for better light as he checked her breathing and heart rate. The strange pulsing sound that had frightened everyone hours earlier softened until it faded completely. The foal's sides rose and fell in a much steadier rhythm. Finally, after what felt like an endless stretch of waiting, the vet stepped back and said that something inside her must have corrected itself. He explained it in simple terms, saying the swelling and odd movement were likely the result of trapped air, pockets and internal spasms caused by a rare developmental issue. He had suspected it earlier but wanted to be sure before saying anything out loud. The strange rhythms, he added, often confused even experienced handlers because they resembled patterns that could be mistaken for something more alarming. The sheriff lowered his shoulders in relief. The ranch owner placed a hand on the stall door, letting out a slow breath. The ranch hands relaxed one by one, the tension easing from their faces. The mare nudged her young one again, this time with a gentler push, almost as if she understood the danger had passed. The sheriff asked if the foal was safe now. The vet nodded and said she still needed rest and steady care for the next couple of days, but everything pointed toward a full recovery. He also assured everyone that nothing harmful or suspicious was involved. His conclusion settled the matter before the rumors in town had a chance to grow into something unmanageable. The ranch owner's wife stepped forward with a soft smile. She moved slowly, not wanting to startle the foal, and quietly placed a fresh blanket over her back. The foal shifted a little but accepted the warmth, settling into the straw with a long exhale. The mare leaned her head over her baby, her breathing finally calm. Once the foal was resting, the sheriff gathered the ranch owner and the vet near the barn door. He spoke calmly, explaining he would file a straightforward report noting the unusual symptoms and the vet's findings, with no mention of anything that might raise unnecessary alarm. The vet nodded in agreement, and the ranch owner thanked him for handling the situation with understanding and patience. The sheriff tipped his hat, saying he knew how much these animals meant to the ranch and that it was their responsibility to protect the ranch's peace, not disrupt it. After the sheriff and his officers left, the ranch hands brought fresh water for the mare and cleaned the stall carefully. The ranch dog curled up nearby, his ears relaxed now that the tension was gone. The daylight grew stronger outside, casting warm streaks through the barn slats, softening the edges of the long night they had just lived through. Later that morning, the ranch owner stepped outside with the vet. They walked slowly toward the corral, the sky turning a bright blue above them. The owner thanked the vet again for staying through the night, saying he did not know how they would have managed without him. The vet waved the gratitude off gently, saying he had seen rare cases before and knew when something unexpected called for extra patience. He also mentioned that the foal's unusual symptoms would make a good reference for future cases, though he wouldn't use any details that might draw outside attention. The ranch owner nodded, grateful for the thoughtful approach. He explained that the ranch had weathered all kinds of challenges, But something like this reminded him how fragile life could be and how quickly panic could spread. The vet agreed, saying the way everyone worked together made the outcome possible. He added that the foal had a strong will to survive, and that alone made a world of difference. When the vet finally left, the ranch owner walked back to the barn. The morning sun had warmed the wood, filling the space with a calm, comfortable glow. He stood by the stall for a moment, watching the foal rest beneath the blanket. The mare lifted her head and looked at him with soft eyes, as if thanking him for the long night. He reached through the bars and let his hand rest lightly on her neck. She accepted the touch easily. The ranch hands drifted back into their regular chores, conversation light and steady now that the fear had lifted. Someone mentioned making a note to repair a couple of loose boards on the barn's windward side. Another talked about checking the east pasture fence before the next herd rotation. Life returned to its steady, familiar rhythm, the kind that brought comfort after a long stretch of uncertainty. The ranch owner's wife brought warm bread from the kitchen later that morning, giving pieces to the ranch hands as they worked. She stepped inside the barn again with a pail of warm mash for the mare. When she saw the foal still resting peacefully, her eyes softened even more. She told her husband she had hardly slept, but that seeing the foal look so calm made every worry from the night feel small in comparison. He agreed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. By midday, the foal tried standing again. The ranch owner knelt beside her while the mare steadied her with a gentle nudge. This time, the foal found her balance long enough to take a few shaky steps before settling back down in the straw. Everyone nearby smiled at the effort. The ranch owner told his wife that those steps were a sign of strength, not strain, and the vet's advice to give her time was proving right. As the day stretched on, word spread across the ranch that everything was all right. There were no dangerous mysteries left, just a young foal recovering from something unexpected and rare. The atmosphere on the ranch grew light again, filled with the usual sounds of cattle moving, horses shifting in their stalls, and the soft ring of tools being used around the barns. The land felt familiar and safe once more. In the following days, the foal grew steadier. The strange swelling faded and her energy returned. The ranch hands found themselves watching her more often than usual, partly out of caution and partly out of affection. They had stayed up through the night with her, and that long stretch of worry had bonded them even more to her. The ranch owner made sure she received the best feed and gentle care, grateful that the scare had ended with hope instead of loss. When the sheriff stopped by again later in the week to finalize his statements, he smiled when he saw the foal standing confidently beside her mother. He said it was good to see her doing so well and that he had already closed the incident. He reminded everyone that sometimes unusual things happened in nature, and the best anyone could do was respond with level heads and steady hands. The ranch owner thanked him again, and the sheriff left with the satisfied look of a man who knew he had handled things right. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in long streaks of gold and rose, the ranch owner stood by the fence watching the foal follow her mother through the pasture. Her steps were light, her tail flicking with playful energy. The ranch dog ran along the fence line, barking happily as if celebrating her return to full strength. The ranch owner's wife joined him, slipping her hand into his. They both watched in quiet appreciation, grateful for the peace that had settled over the ranch after the fear-filled night. He told her that moments like these reminded him why he dedicated his life to the land and the animals on it. She nodded and said that sometimes the hardest nights brought out the best in people, and that this ranch had seen that truth again. Together they watched the foal trot after her mother, the two of them outlined against the warm glow of the fading light. It was a simple sight, yet it carried a deep sense of relief and gratitude. The ranch had faced confusion and fear, but it ended with understanding, teamwork, and a hopeful future. The foal paused for a moment and looked back toward the barn as if she remembered the long night too. Then she turned and ran ahead with fresh strength, kicking up dust that sparkled in the sinking sun. The ranch owner smiled, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders completely. The land breathed easy again. The animals were safe. The mystery had been solved. And the peace of the ranch settled into every corner like a promise for brighter days.